There it is.
There it is. Yeah, Ben actually asked if we could record this because he really wishes he could attend.
All right.
So thank you for reminding me.
Cool.
Oh,
Well, I'm just gonna jump in then. I have some slides put together, and I think it'll be good fodder for some discussion. But since we have an hour, right? Yeah.
Yep.
I'll try to keep the slides and everything kind of brief because I really do want to open up a lot of discussion toward the end because I'm throwing out some ideas for processes and that kind of stuff here. So want to make this as collaborative and discussion based as we can. Well, that said,
Michael, I can keep an eye on chat and raised hands so that you don't have to worry about that. So y'all please use those features.
Sweet, thank you. That's awesome. All right, let's do some screen sharing. Now you guys see how messy my desktop is.
hey, how do you raise a hand here? I don't think I've done that.
Click on reaction.
Reaction. Oh, okay, cool. Because I just talk. I just interrupt people and jump.
You?
Me? Never.
Little you?
No
yeah.
way.
If you raise your hand, it'll kick you to the top of the side view. So
Okay, awesome. I'm still learning Zoom. Thank you.
Sweet. We need to add that to your upskills matrix. Cool. So yeah, this is kind of the culmination, I think, of a lot of discussions. I mean, we were talking about tooling and how to standardize, or whether we should even standardize, like years ago back at Capital Factory. So I think we've had so many people with so many good ideas all over the place, and there's a lot that we just can start to capitalize on now that we've battle tested a lot of stuff against client work. We've had some de facto standards that kind of popped up, and really, to the extent we can, the whole idea is to just start speaking more of a common language and figure out what tools we're lacking, figure out a process to make those tools if we need them, and then make it as seamless for everyone as we can. But a lot of this is probably redundant. You guys all feel this viscerally, I'm sure. But like I said, there's been a lot that we put in place to improve workflows, but the adoption stuff is really hard. A lot of times people solve a problem in isolation, and there's no mechanism for that feedback to really bubble up. An example is, we had to do a lot of detect run 2 stuff for Tanger, and that is a really cumbersome library to play with. And then I think someone else started using detect run 2 separately. I think it might have been ZZ or Spencer, and I'm sure there were a couple issues that we just didn't communicate back out to the team that are really easy to run into at detect run 2, and we need to mind share as much as we can there. And obviously, the billable work stuff, it takes priority. It's really hard to set aside, carve out time to work on this kind of stuff. I try to, I make some libraries here and there when it makes sense, but even I'm guilty of not trying to blast it back out and teach people about it and spread the good word. These all, I think, are pretty self-explanatory, but I just wanted to reiterate, that there is a core need for us to come up with, just some processes and ideas around the concept of tooling, as broad as that might sound. And maybe this is a little redundant here too, but I think it's important to note that ideally, whatever we decide to do for tooling, we're optimizing for things like growth. I don't think it's going to be, we say, all right, we spend 2 weeks, we all get in a room, we figure out all these ideal tools to use for our workflow. And then at the end of that, we all go back to our day jobs. And then, someone comes out with a really incredible library a week later, and a lot of what we did was obsolete. I think a lot of this is something that needs to be kind of process-based and, needs to be part of our workflow rather than something we do on the side when we have time. This is also kind of like a product here where we're our own customers, but we want to have seamless experience on a day-to-day basis so that we can, enjoy our jobs, spend time on the stuff we like, and then automate the stuff we don't like as much. I think all this other stuff is kind of in line too, but a big one we don't talk about a lot that I think is important as well is complexity. I think there's a certain cognitive load that comes with trying to learn a new tool, read the documentation, even if the perfect tool comes out and it's exactly what we need for, training object detection models or something, it's bigger than how well the tool works. There's all this extra upskilling stuff that's part of it. So I think that's really important to consider too. That all makes sense so far. Anybody got any questions, or I'm just kind of rambling at this point? It'll get more interesting, I promise.
No, this is great.
Awesome.
So yeah, how do we get there? I think the first step is kind of understanding the current process. I had a conversation with Krishi this morning, and I think we're going to try to work to spend one-on-one time with people, get an idea of like, are there some de facto tools and standards that already exist that we've kind of adopted without putting it on paper anywhere? I think a lot of that would make sense for us to at least document. So if we have new people that come onto the team, we want them to know at least what everyone uses typically, like whether that's Matplotlib or Seaborn or Plotly or something for visualization. It'd just be nice if we're all using roughly the same toolkit all the time. And then, yeah, a tracking framework. I think, maybe a year or two ago, it wouldn't have made sense because we're so Wild West, but now it's getting to the point that I think we all are starting to kind of converge in our own little workflows. I see this from client project to client project. And especially, I think we're getting into the position now where we need to get closer to that convention over configuration kind of thing. We need to start just, picking some stuff that, especially the non-controversial stuff that we don't care about. If we're going to be building all these high level abstractions on top of core tools and processes that we have, let's pick some stuff so that we don't have to configure a bajillion things and then write a bunch of code that's doesn't need to be there. And this kind of effort does take a lot of time and energy. So I think there does need to be a little bit of a core group of straws to stir the tooling drinks here. I think Krishi and I will probably be mostly, we'll track a lot of this work because, Spencer sent out a note and mentioned that I'm really passionate about this stuff. That's totally true. And, Krishi has a total coverage and visibility on just about every project by nature of what she's working on. So I think we'll be a good core team, but anybody else that's passionate about this stuff that wants to work on, establishing tooling, building out new tooling, coming up with libraries if we need them, figuring out if they make sense. Open invite. If you're passionate about it, just let me know. We'll include you.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, real quick.
Yep.
One, I appreciate the food theme, the last 3 bullets. I'm going to assume that bake was intentional as well. And 2, Nicholas has his hand raised.
What's up, Nicholas?
Thanks, Michael. Is this something that you ultimately see us exporting?
Yeah, I've got something a little more concrete here shortly. Or by exporting, do you mean like documenting and putting into something portable that new people can see?
Well, it seems like there's every day, or at least a couple of years ago, there's just like a million Silicon Valley startups that are like, we're going to make an AI stack that works. And it would seem like just almost by coincidence, we're really well positioned to do that just because we have so much exposure. Is this, do you see this becoming something that's actually valuable to our organization as like a secret sauce, or maybe even something that we might, I don't know, raise funds for and develop into a product?
Certainly, I think that could happen. I think we have some unique needs as an organization that, like for instance, we're doing consulting work, so we have to be platform agnostic. We're not like a product company where we can just say we're an AWS company and we're a TensorFlow company and we're all these other things, because some client might come along and say, oh, we're actually using this stuff, and we have to respect that. But I could totally see that happening. That's a great question. I see Steve's got his hand up as well.
Yeah, thanks. And just to follow on to that, Nicholas, that's definitely what a big thing that I'm wanting to help focus on as well, is figure out, as we determine what are some really valuable pieces of, like, say, now that we've done whatever, 10 LNP projects and 15 computer vision projects, what do we want to package up as a potential proprietary library that we can then license to use, both in government contracts and potentially in commercial ones as well. And there are a variety of ways that we could monetize that, things ranging from charging licensing fees for those components ourselves directly, or then I know, so Amazon has its own, basically its own library where you can offer packages and you can set the pricing. In those cases, Amazon takes 20% and then you get that. You could charge set the pricing to be whatever you wanted to. So that's an option. There's even an IC marketplace version where you have to go through additional hoops, but once you have a package that's been approved for the open marketplace, you can get into the IC marketplace. So if like parts of the DoD or the IC wanted to use some software, like they would be able to do that. It would just everything would be containerized, and then we would just get a percentage, and that would allow us to start, even though we'll always fundamentally be a professional services company. But as you noted, Nicholas, there might be some IP licensing offerings and potentially spin-off opportunities as well. So I think that fits in well with some of the thoughts that Stephen has as part of our 3-year strategic plan that he's going to be spearheading as well. So, but awesome stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, beautifully put. 100%. Yeah, this is, I mean, I'm assuming Steve, all these efforts will stay in super close contact and make sure that all the IP that comes out of this, we're handling the right way.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. And then I have a little teaser at the end of that for this whole food truck idea. Not even going to go into detail yet because I'll let Zizi do that here shortly. But this is kind of like our end goal here. So without further ado, this is a stab at what I think would make a lot of sense for us. Why is this going all over the place? This is kind of built off of some ideas that Endurance had kind of set the precedent for in Confluence. But if there was one takeaway that I wanted to kind of push on everyone, is to just bookmark this page whenever you get off this meeting. This engineering toolbox section, it's in our engineering Confluence here. And the whole idea here is it's just a really simple home to track any decisions we make about tooling and kind of to track the discussion history. And it's just a place to document all that. And I have the search bar here that will only look in this section here called tool cards. And if you look, let's search, like, let's say you need a tool for version control or something like that. Search it. I put a little example in here, but I don't know if anybody saw what Alessandra put out on the labeling tool comparison stuff, but I think that kind of page is exactly what the kind of information that we would want to put surrounding a tool. So some of these might be totally non-controversial. They might be something we just decide asynchronously. We'll track all the decisions, and I think it's kind of, I don't want this to be a bunch of a documentation burden for everyone else. So I think me and Krishi will kind of maintain this kind of stuff. But the whole idea is that if you want to know, you say, I want a tool for visualizing data. You might go in here and see that we prefer one tool over another. You might see that one tool has been noted, bad for whatever reason. And I think it's important to note, this isn't going to be, there are a few things that are kind of, I would say, non-negotiable. Like, we use Git. There's just no way around that. We do source code control, and that's kind of what we use. But this certainly isn't meant to be like a dogmatic kind of edict sort of thing. Like, you must use all these tools. It's meant to be something that just makes your job easier, and meant to be something that is just a resource for you to find preferred tooling. These tooling discussions, as we have ideas, they might turn into something that become more of a requirement if the impacts are really big. But I think for the time being, there's nothing earth shattering. You're always gonna have a client that comes in and says, we use X, Y, and Z tooling, and we're an Azure company. Sorry, you gotta use Azure stuff, and we just kind of have to do that. So Spencer had the idea of going through creating one of these together, and we'll do that here shortly. But if I go back to the slides here, there is also a Jira board that I created, and it's just this engineering toolbox thing. I don't know what this deal is with this mouse. I think the scrolling's messed up or something. But if
probably.
Oh, what's that? Nanobots?
I said I blame Fox probably.
Oh yeah, he's definitely the culprit somehow.
Or peanut butter.
Or peanut butter. It could be. I had a PB&J for lunch, so. Yeah, so the whole idea is that this is like a source for, let's say you're in the middle of a flurry of client work. You're like, oh, this is crazy. I don't have time to do anything other than just these tasks at hand. You should be able to feel free, anybody on this team, to come and create a ticket that says, evaluate X tool, or it could be as vague as, I need a tool that handles configuration management, or whatever. Or you could see that there's some tool that we have already decided is kind of preferred tool, and you say, hey, that thing sucks. Let's go back and review that a little more for these reasons. This is meant to be just like a single stop shop for you to be able to request that it gets a second look at it, or a first look if it's kind of a feature request. And we do need a little bit of standardization on a lot of stuff. I kind of brainstormed here, but I put a few things here like unit testing, experiment tracking, deep learning framework. This is a really big list, but it's like anything from handling your environment, like secrets management, issue tracking. A lot of this stuff is really low priority and probably won't make the cut for getting a lot of attention. But some other things like, one of the things I noticed we really are kind of on the fence about is how to handle models. Like, where do they go when you're training? Do they get stuck in a logs directory and that's it? On your local machine? Do you have a shared EFS drive between a bunch of development environments? Do you use DVC to track it and get the version control? Answering that, I think, is kind of a complicated, there's a complicated answer to that I think it requires a lot of discussion and feedback. And I'm hoping that these conversations that Krishi and I have with you guys are kind of, can help us figure out which of these areas needs the most attention right now. And I think a success story here would be that, good tooling, I think, kind of adopts itself. In my head, you'd be able to go to this engineering toolbox search page, and this will make your job easier, and it'll just feel seamless and not frustrating at all. I see Dwayne's got his hand up. What's up, Dwayne?
Yeah, Michael, I'm all about operationalizing things, and I know we're going to get to a period very soon where there will be a little bit of downtime in between projects for people, which is always awesome, regardless of taking vacation time or not. My question is, Michael, to you and to Daniel, shouldn't there be two ways of doing this, right? One where we can have default Jira board projects that have all the standard stuff that we do, and then one Jira board that has everything, right? So that if you have to take pieces of the puzzle into creating your next thing, regardless of whose responsibility it is, you have that all your fingertips. You have kind of the macro level here. What I'm speaking about is the micro level reading up, right? And then we know basically we've got 5 or 6 different project types from our current end-to-end solution set, now including strategy and now including transformation. So we should be able to create template Jira boards with the stuff, right?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, to me, the idea of tooling is really vague. It could be anything as specific as, like someone wants to do object detection, and it's, maybe points to a gist with source code that says this is a default object detection model that's pretty good workhorse, all the way up to this really meta stuff that's like project tracking, whatever. Yeah, I think that totally fits in. I would also add, I have it separate. I think I kind of glossed over it here, but this, yeah, the baking feedback into existing processes, I think it would be really fruitful for at least me or Krishi or someone that's passionate about this stuff to be involved in project kickoffs and retros. Because if there's, like, yeah, if Daniel's the PM and he's running this retro, and then it's all kind of tailored toward this, how well did things go with the client? Do we have any lessons learned? In my head, there should be a question in there that says, did you try out any new tooling? Was anything frustrating? Did you spend a lot of time debugging something that was annoying? Right now, we don't have any of those feedback mechanisms. And that feels like the bleeding that we need to stop as soon as we can.
Yeah, so Michael, just to close off on the first part, I think think about what that might look like in the authorization of what we just talked about in the JIRA boards. For the second part of your question, the retros is easy. So the PMO can integrate anybody at any time, right? The kickoffs are harder. We can't have faces in a meeting with a client generally that then disappear, right? So there are pre-kickoff times that could happen, right? With our internal teams, so our internal kickoffs. And that information can be baked into the future retros where we're gathering that information. And we're starting to do that across all of our projects with the Easy Retro tool. Some of you probably have seen or will see soon.
Hey, a new tool.
Yeah, so making that a reality right now is starting to happen and will happen.
Cool. Yeah, I don't think that any of this should be external, like client facing, unless whoever's doing the tooling stuff happens to be on that project. So totally agree. That all sounds great. Cool. Yeah, thanks for bringing up those points, Dwayne. Yeah, so I'll kind of summarize all this by saying, I'd imagine that I'm not going to just say that there's this one process that we need to follow. We need 2 or 3 approvers to adopt a tool. It needs to go through 2 or 3 client projects. We'll probably end up with something like that, but I feel like it's just premature to say that there's this established process. It feels more important to me, at least, to throw people at it that care about it, and get feedback from the team, and then kind of lay the tracks as we're going. So we might do, for really easy tooling that just happens to be sporadic, we might set out some de facto standards that are already there and no one cares. But for these more contentious type discussions that are more like culture wars, maybe we'll do a tooling shootout kind of session. We'll grab a couple beers during a happy hour or something and kind of just talk about tools we're really passionate about. I really haven't figured that part out yet, but I think we'll get somewhere there. So all that said, I'm gonna pause there. Does that all make sense, everyone? I know that's a lot, and that's a fairly big change to how we've been doing things so far. So I'm really curious to see if anybody has some gut reactions, negative, positive. What's everyone thinking?
Say that I don't want to be the first one to say.
Awesome job.
Absolutely. Spencer likes it. He did a little dance. I'm not sure if you saw that, Michael. He's 100%.
I didn't see it. I saw Nicholas and you, I think. But I'm happy to know that Spencer's dancing. I see Max got his hand up.
Can you go back to the slide describing the process?
This one or the next one?
I guess it's the Kanban board. So it's basically just like if this is the Kanban board. I'm just afraid that if it's incorporated directly into sort of our project workflow with the project manager and stuff like that, it'll get attention. I'm just sort of afraid that we'll be like, yes, let's get all our engineering tooling in order. And then we'll just sort of forget about it and get occupied with other things. And it'll just sort of get pushed to the side. So that's sort of my concerns. Like, how do we make sure to actually gather opinions from the team and put these processes in place?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I think a key limitation, as I wrote this out here, is it doesn't solve for the case that someone doesn't know that they need a tool. There's no like active babysitting of this stuff. So I think that having a few of us that are passionate about it, that do pair programming a lot with people, that'll kind of spread things. I was going to talk to Ron and Ryman about, I don't know how much time makes sense and how frequently, but I think starting with Krishi and I were talking about this morning, like 10 minutes a week in our engineering meeting to just talk about here are some updates. We decided that these tools make a lot of sense. Here's what we're evaluating. So keeping that dialogue open feels really important. Potluck, I think, is another great thing, to the extent that I hope everyone at least knows of Potluck. But if we can use that to generate new templates, and we're actively updating that as part of this, tooling effort, then it's going to be easier to use the right tooling because it's going to be pre-populated for you. Those aren't all of the solutions, I would guess, and I'm totally open to listen to any other ideas you might have. But those are kind of my first thoughts on how we tackle that.
Sweet, thank you.
I saw Nicholas' hand go up as well.
Yeah, so you made a really good point about like sort of for some people, I've noticed some people are very passionate about what tools they use and what tools they don't use. And you briefly alluded to like some sort of, cultural clash that could happen. And I've seen it a couple of times now. Actually, KUNGFU is the only company where I haven't seen this, where data science team and the engineering team use very different tooling and are very much at odds with each other, which contributes to, project politics. So how do we and of course, in those situations, saying everyone's going to use this tool, that would have gone really badly, I can imagine. So as we move to standardize, so we can automate, which I agree is totally the right thing. How are we handling people's feelings?
Yeah, I think we have a great cultural foundation to set the stage for that being a fairly easy job compared to other companies. I think we're all really collaborative. We're all fairly even keeled. I think it seems unlikely that we're going to get into a really intense culture war. And, I'm happy to play like the tiebreaker if we're hosting some sort of session like that or something. But I would hope that that anything we do, we want to make sure that not only is it a data-driven decision, like we've used it on multiple clients, but that it's hashed out with a lot of discussion in those really contentious ones. I would imagine if we're still arguing about it after a really long time, it's probably something that's a matter of opinion anyway. So yeah, I'm hoping that our cultural foundation is enough to help mitigate that becoming a really big problem, but we'll see. And if we gotta get a little bit fancier with some conflict mitigation later, I think we will.
Well, and also it's you can kind of set some rules and boundaries for having these types of discussions where if someone doesn't reply or someone is silent and has 3 opportunities to say something, then that's agreement. Or if X percentage of people agree on this one tool, it's sort of okay, I disagree, but I'm going to go with the team. You can set some rules in place for, even if there's not consensus, you can still have agreement.
Yep, that's a great point. And I think kind of implicit in a lot of that is, we'll have these tooling shootout kind of meetings where I'll make sure that anyone that's on the engineering team that wants to come is welcome. But if you don't care, then yeah, you don't have to show up either. And if you don't show up, then that there's kind of a little bit of agreement implicit in that. But nothing I don't think will ever be final because the tooling landscape evolves all the time. Someone might come up with something tomorrow that makes a lot of the code we already have obsolete. And at that point, I would imagine someone would go make a ticket in this Jira board and say, hey, let's reevaluate this one thing. And then, we're back off to the races. I see, yeah, thanks, Raymond. And I see Steve's got his hand up as well.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to fall into that because I can imagine there are different sort of levels of, quote unquote, a lot of stuff could fall into this general area of tooling, right? So you can think about, well, it probably doesn't matter if people are really passionate about and want to use Visual Studio versus JetBrains, right? I mean, that's obviously a lot of stuff, just what goes into there. And even if somebody's like, well, I'm just way more familiar with Keras than PyTorch or whatever. So we might have some standard and and that might even in some cases come from clients as well, right? They might have, for a particular client, it might have to be in one or the other, but maybe we have some package solutions for either of those, just as how Endurance had really started us off with some standard solutions for AWS or GCPs. You can imagine it's not, I don't think it will necessarily ever be like a one size fits all, but here are some like basically options to consider. And then the folks who are on each of the project teams can consider what is our best understanding. And there might even be trade-offs for if you're going to be doing this sort of project, and it's really just going to be a POC as opposed to, wow, we're trying to update something that is already in production. So we already know what the scalability requirements are. So you might come to very different solutions. So that's another thing too, is as you as we think about these things, just think about the whole ecosystem of possible choices and realize that we have both flexibility and creativity. And the whole, I think one of the things that you already communicated really well is that the hope is by building up our institutional knowledge and some of these productized sets of tools is so that we can reduce risks, spend more time doing the really interesting and valuable work and less of spend less time doing the simple things that oh gosh, we forgot to configure whatever it is, some AWS setting or something like that. So the more that we can do that, I think the more energy we can have for like getting to the really interesting AI and machine learning kinds of things. So hopefully it's less of the boring, more of the interesting, and a lot more learning for us and for the clients.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. Yeah. Let someone say something.
I'd love to see like AWS batch, Google's equivalent of that, just like some part of our project template being like, launch a training job with these arguments. Okay, it shoots off a batch job and then it gets back to me. I don't have to log in, turn on the VM, turn off the VM, copy stuff from A to B, and then I can just mount stuff locally on my laptop on S3. I would love to see that, by the way. If you're looking for
Let's do it. Let's get there. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Like Daniel had a good recommendation in the chat as well.
What was that? And then Scott after that.
Sorry, Penny started crying right as I unmuted. Stop. Daniel, you want to say it?
Yeah, I said it. I actually had a couple ideas. As we adopt tools, we could perhaps add tags or flags saying this is a required tool, this is a recommended tool, this is optional. Something we could consider. So we could kind of prioritize them in that way. There might be certain tools like GitHub that we always use, that's required, but other ones are, it's not a hard and fast rule, but it's recommended that you use this one over that one. But then you could also have like kind of like tech stack profiles. Like if we're working on one tech stack, maybe the recommendations are slightly different, but we've tested, it's tried and true that like this package, this set of tools all work well together. So take this list here for that stack.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. And I think it goes without saying too, that I think this should be like a totally decentralized, collaborative kind of thing. Anybody that wants to help with these kind of decisions, whether that's obviously the engineering team will be writing some of the code, will probably be heavy on, me and Krishi. But the discussions, the ideas, the management of the stuff, PMs, whoever wants to get involved, I think the more people that are, the more input we'll get, the better we'll be.
Even PMs?
Yeah, even PMs. Yeah, is that, you got your hand up there. What's up, man?
Well, that was it. No.
Even PMs. There's your answer.
I was gonna say it'll be, once we get the dust settles on this, you think about it that a process is a tool too. These are all digital things, but maybe that's down the road of like, because that could be something too, like, oh, I'm in a short project. What's our cadence for, how do we run short projects, or what are things that we do for different scenarios or something like that. But,
yep. Yeah, I love it. Yeah,
like
this process here, I think I was thinking about it, depending on I mean, this could be a product offering for a startup or something if you do it right. Because everyone nowadays is trying to always figure out, what's the best tool for the job that fits my organization. And I think if we can keep it data driven and flexible, then we'll end up with something pretty cool.
Yep.
All right, I'm gonna jump forward here because I only got 20 minutes and a decent amount to cover, I guess. I thought this was interesting. I wrote a little repo to just sync all our repos in a temp directory and load the Python files and do some basic analysis. But these are what our most imported modules are. I think you probably saw this in the engineering channel if you guys follow that. But yeah, TensorFlow, PyTorch, Keras, those are all pretty split, as you might imagine. I just thought it was pretty neat. I'm going to be trying to do analyses like these to help inform what makes sense to go after first. But this is just more of a check it out kind of thing.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, that was neat. So what does the promised land look like? Like, what's the pie in the sky best case scenario? And I think Nicholas was kind of alluding to it there with this. You don't have to do a lot of configuration. There's not a lot of crap you have to do at the beginning of a project with a preferred cloud. And because actually, no, I'm just gonna go to the next slide and let ZZ jump in because these slides are his. ZZ, you want to go over or just kind of briefly touch on these two slides? Are you on the call?
Okay, sorry, let me unmute myself. Let me see the slides. Oh, okay. Yeah, so this is just a very, very rough draft of the things that we could bring to the food truck when we, deploy a team to a client site, right? So just thinking about, for example, for Clarity, we would set up a certain cloud infrastructure. Clarity uses AWS, and we have used a list of services there from Snowball to S3. Of course, everyone uses S3, AWS Batch, and SageMaker, to name a few. There are a bunch of others too. I think Secret Manager. I'm not sure whether Cognito was there, but the cloud stack for AWS, for GCP, if we can simply up it, like I'm imagining if we of course we can use any we can build another tool for it, but imagine we build it into Potluck, and imagine you can do Potluck up, and then it ups a stack so that you don't have to click around in the AWS console to open up services, and sometimes it fails and you need to do that again, right? It's very time consuming. I would love to focus more time on actually making modeling decisions rather than digging through different log stream. Hey, where's my log for this training? that really takes up a lot of time. And how do I figure out VPC? Why can I not access that instance? Stuff like that. So cloud provisioning tools, that's one big thing. Domain-specific schema, what I mean by that is really the data. So if you think about it, what is client-specific and what is not? I really like to try to spend less time coding everything again. That's not client-specific. So if a certain computer vision training pipeline, we're not sure whether we should use, for example, S3 or EFS to feed the data in, or should we use Keras sequence, or should we write another class to generate the batches? Those decisions are not client specific. Those are very domain specific in terms of computer vision. So I would really love, so every time I have to redo that again, investigate, what is the best way to do it on a client, on a client project. I just scratch my head and I blame myself for not already coding that up and already making the best practices. So domain specific, for example, computer vision tooling and recipes, those needs to be more and more pre-built. I feel that will save us a lot of time and stress. But then client-specific stuff, we probably need to write adapters, right, to convert the data to a common data schema. For example, recommendation has a certain schema. It always has a clickstream and the catalog of products. For computer vision, is typically one example is one or more images, and then 3 types of targets mainly, right? And then PMO tools, I'm not qualified to talk more into that, but I see Jira is really making strides, and more tooling there, standardization there probably helps. And then for IoT related projects, having some pre-studied best practices on which edge device, which accelerator to choose, that would be great. And on top of those, we build, if we can build like vision specific, NLP specific, tabular specific, time series, graph specific libraries. I'm using Hugging Face as a model. I feel that's a really great level of abstraction, and I wish to learn from that. And I hope to start soon a computer vision library that's similar. That's and on top of the ML libs, I can see some client-specific adapters to the data and to the infrastructure, so that we, when we are doing client project, we do less coding, we do more operating, so that we just write adapters and then start babysitting stuff, because babysitting stuff is the time that we probably cannot save. So, but watching experiments and making decisions on which next experiments to run, which next features to add, I feel that's kind of like the core fun part of the machine learning problem anyway. So sorry for my rambling, and feel free to chime in or comments.
I love it.
Okay. Yeah, there's another slide. So I'm thinking, like, if we have a stack, our internal stack, which we can configure and quote unquote deploy. It's not a training model deploy. It's a deploying the training pipeline, deploying the stack to train the models. It's kind of like a food truck. For Iodine, it's NLP, medical. For Clarity, it's medical imaging. For Policy Reporter, it's another stack, both in terms of cloud and the machine learning libraries, machine learning recipes sitting on top of that, as well as client-specific adapters sitting on top of that in turn, right? So, and if we could do that, if we could, for example, use Potluck or any other tool to configure the food truck. So if a client wants a barbecue, we bring a barbecue related stove and pots and pans. If the client wants ice cream, we need freezer and other tools. So if we could configure the tooling that we bring to the client's cloud and hook up with the cloud resources, compute and storage, that would be a fantastic saving uptime. And on the other hand, I see the information flow as both ways. So we not only pull down tooling from a commonly built tool set to the client-specific projects, similar to open source projects community, right? You can contribute upstream once you figure out, hey, for iodine, there's some recipe that's really good, which can generalize well. So you push that upstream to our tooling repos. I feel that would be great. And this could be a far stretch. I feel like, Daniel, Scott, you guys probably, spend a lot of time chatting with people and see project status and, get update on, hey, which models are being built, where are the blockers. If the AI stations have endpoints which you can query, hey, what's the status? How many models have you trained? have the recent experiment failed or succeeded? What's the accuracy like? If there's certain kind of reporting endpoints there to indicate health of training pipeline, health of data, health of deployed models and services, I feel that will be fantastic. But of course, I think we are pretty far from there. That's really close to almost semi-automated or even fully automated model training stations, right? Yeah, I feel like covered most. There are probably still something missing.
No, that's
I think that's how I want to talk about now.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate you going over that, ZZ, because I think that is like the dream big promised land. That's where we want to be. And although it feels like it's hard to get there, I think we're all smart people and we're capable, and I think we can do this. I think it's kind of like one of those Parkinson's law things. If you think in your head it's going to take 5 years to do that, then it'll probably take 5 years. But if we think that we can prioritize things and do it in 6 to 8 months or something, then I think that makes sense too. But we'll start small here. I think this is a start of something. Anybody that's worked with Steven a fair bit is, you've heard his whole edict about, in order to do the right thing well, you got to do the right thing poorly first. This is no exception to that. We're going to probably mess some stuff up. We're going to break some stuff, but we'll end up somewhere good. And I think it's the most important thing to me is starting this data-driven cycle of getting refined and just standardizing where it makes sense and not standardizing where it doesn't make sense. And we already have a bunch of tooling that me, ZZ, Endurance, Krishi, Spencer, we've all worked on stuff separately that I'm guilty of this. It never got to this adoption stage. I don't even know if this is useful to people. I found it useful in one context where this is a cloud client where you just say, I'm starting a session, it's AWS. You say you want a client, this works for GCP and AWS. And after you create the session thing, all the APIs and everything are canonical and the same downstream of that. So to me, this feels like an example of like one of those adapter type things. It all sounds great. Like this might be something useful, but maybe not. And I think it behooves us to take this data-driven approach, battle test things on client work, and get this process going so that we get to the right end result as quick as we can. We got 9 minutes. I was going to go through just a dummy example to put one of these in there just so you guys can see what this process looks like. But did any of that spark any questions before I close this stuff out? Sounds like negative. Cool. Well, I'll keep this fairly brief, but let's just take a hypothetical example. Let's say you're doing some client work and you realize, hey, we don't really have a standard version control system. You go into, anybody can access this, and I think so. If not, I'm going to go fix all the access here. But let's say, oh yeah, we need some version control. So let's just create a new issue. Version control standardization. And let's say, description's like, hey, I heard Git is pretty cool, but I've also seen stuff like SVN. Are we using the best tool? And at that point, it gets stuck in the backlog. Imagine me, Krishi, anybody else that's interested in this would be meeting regularly and kind of treat this exactly like like a Scrum kind of thing. We'll see this come through and be like, oh, it looks like someone wants to make sure that we're standardizing version control. So we'll prioritize it if it makes sense against all the other work. I'll be like, okay, we're working on this one. And then you'd go to our engineering toolbox. Presumably the person that made that ticket searched for version control and didn't see a tool card for that specific type of tool. So you'd go to, and I think this would probably be people on the tooling team here creating these tool cards. I want it to be fairly seamless for the engineers, so you guys don't have to sweat too much of this stuff. But let's say I want to minimize that guy. Oops, I am a Confluence noob. So you make a new tool card. There's a tool card template here. So we'll call this source code version control. The purpose here would be to collaborate within teams and provide documented history of code control. We'll come back to the decision here. This template's got little instructions in it. You know, maybe this one's specific to implementation. So maybe GitHub is one, GitLab, maybe SVN, we'll find a link for that, something like that. This issue here, let's copy the link to it. Oops. Copy issue link. We will stick it here so that if anyone wants to see any discussion history, they can go straight for that. They can see the status here. And this would be, I think I'll probably work with you, Daniel, to figure out some good statuses that are descriptive here. Under preferred tools, maybe we'll put, you know, status none selected, and maybe we'll figure out and track this work through the ticket and say we need to hold another couple meetings, meet with the entire engineering team. This is a really big one. This is a big decision that involves a lot of stakeholders. And then over time, we'll update this tool card and we'll say, you know, GitHub. That'll be kind of our source of truth. If it's relevant, you can compare these tools here. And then finally, in keeping with this decision log precedent that Endurance started here, you would add a decision. GitHub is the preferred tool for source code control. And that's it. And presumably next time, so I'll publish this, someone will go back to this engineering toolbox, they'll search version control. And then they'll see, oh, look, source code version control, there's precedent for that. Go back here. If they want to know why it was selected, go to this issue. And then, you know, in keeping with kind of Steve's ideas there, I'm going to eat my words. I know I said convention over configuration, but maybe sometimes the cost of the configuration is worth it for us. So under preferred tools, we'll say, we're ambivalent. You can use TensorFlow or PyTorch, whatever you want. We don't see a reason to standardize that. And that's, you know, that's the end of the discussion. So I'll summarize all this by saying, you'll probably all start seeing some, me and Krishi putting some time on people's calendars. We haven't figured out if we're going to start with a survey or something like that. But the core idea here is to try to understand everyone's process as best we can. Like what IDEs do people use? What are the environments like? We'll focus a lot on deep learning libraries and tooling around that, I'm sure. And once an output from that is going to be this prioritized list of, okay, this one type of tooling, it's the Wild West. Everyone's using all sorts of stuff. We need to kind of rein that in. We'll just start slowly trying to standardize and create as many of these tool cards as we can, so that I'm hoping in a couple of weeks, all this stuff organically listed here. And then anytime we have a new person come on that just doesn't know what types of tools we use, they can go here and see the history. It's all in one place. And you know, if it doesn't work, if it sucks, we'll do something else. But it seems as good a time as any to just give something a shot and see what happens. So that is all I had. We got 2.5 minutes here. If anyone has any other questions or ideas.
That's awesome, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
I'm
man.
excited about it.
Thank you, Michael. This is awesome. I believe we all think that tooling are important and really helpful, and really love the Lego blocks that we can readily use in projects without having to rebuild a lot. And, you know, just having more time, more dedication towards automating ourselves rather than just helping other people automating and automating their work. We also need to help ourselves. I feel like more dedicated time and process dedicated to tooling and automation, maybe not just the tooling, but also maybe even butting heads on client projects, and brainstorm on recipes to train models. Hey, why didn't the accuracy go up? That will also kind of bring the team more together. So I really love this. Thank you, Michael.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've kind of got my own suspicions and hypotheses about what we might work on at first, but everything involved with like experiment tracking and model artifact management, version control, like everything in that orbit feels crazy every time I go to a new project. So if I was a betting man, I would say that would make a lot of sense to start first, but we won't know until we have these conversations. So yeah, thanks, CZ. I appreciate that.
I agree with CZ. This is a strategic investment. And like I've seen us try to do this before, and there just hasn't been actual time allocated to that. And I'd love to see this happen. I'd love to see that change.
Won't let you down, Nicholas.
Yeah, and in particular, just to follow into that, Nicholas, Ron and Scott, I don't know if Daniel's still on, but especially if we can allocate some time when I'd like a project, especially when a project rolls off to, as part of the whole retro process, it's like, was there anything that went particularly well? Like, are there things that we best practices we want to capture, and some of which we might want to, like, for example, Michael, you re-implemented on our own dime the XBS table understanding functionality that you'd done for that. You, on our own dime, re-implemented that, and now that's part of our proprietary KF-PDF parser repo. So maybe just having some dedicated time while it's still fresh in your mind and before you get on to the next project, because as we know, once you're on to the next one, it becomes harder and harder to do that. So maybe that's just one idea, Nicholas, about one way in which we could just like try to institutionalize, do it while everything is still fresh in mind as part of the retro process. Capture any learnings, and if needed, capture some new tool decisions, recommendations, or implementations.
Yeah, totally agree.
Cool.
Cool.
Well, it looks like we're cutting into the happy hour. So if anybody's got to jump, feel free. But I see Spencer's got a question too.
Real quickly, Michael, I've got to drop it. I just want to thank you so much for putting this together. You and ZZ, I really
Very
appreciate
awesome.
this. I'm gonna make a commitment to try to get us in a position where we're making a strategic investment. And by that, I mean carving out time to work on this. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Ron.
Thanks, everybody.
What's up, Spencer?
I just wanted to say thank you, Michael. And then I also have something I wanted to ask is like, maybe not a question we have to answer right now, but what's the KPI for measuring our success on this front? It's
that is a super good question.
I love that question.
That's fine.
I have a suggestion.
Oh, I'm all ears.
We should do project surveys, and we should estimate the amount of time that was spent model building versus anything else. And we should track that over time. And maybe we should do that,
great idea.
Like a weekly survey in the engineering meeting at the first thing we do. And then maybe like if people have really high proportions of time, we actually like use that to inform what to work on next.
Cool. Yeah, I'll make a ticket in this right now and put your thoughts in it, and then we'll track it that way. Love it. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Like thinking about tracking improvements in time spent on model building, and I would think complementary to that, trying to decrease the quote unquote, I want to say wasted, but less than productive time. Like how much did you have to do on data engineering or cloud deployments or things that we hope over time these tools will help us automate and get better and faster at.
Totally.
So more of what we want to do and less of what we don't.
That's the dream.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, Michael and CZ and Krishy. Yeah, you're still Krishy. Thanks for everybody for the great session.
Thanks, Michael.
Absolutely. Expect to hear more. Thanks, guys. Enjoy happy hour.
Bye. Bye.